So, good morning, everybody. My name is David Plazas. I'm the opinion and engagement editor for the Tennessean, and we welcome Tim Garrett, who is a candidate for vice mayor, and also Frank Daniels, fellow editorial board member. Today, we'll be talking about the vice mayor's race. Mr. Garrett is in a race with another candidate who we'll be meeting with tomorrow, and we are so looking forward to talking to you about your life, your experiences, and also why you want this job. And maybe if we could ask you to introduce yourself to the readers about about yourself, a little bit about yourself, and also your experience.
I should say I'm Tim Garrett. I'm a funeral director, and you can go to my website and find out just about everything that you asked me to explain about. But married, have 5 grandsons, expecting the 6th grandson. My wife can't stand it, and I've been in the funeral business, 5th generation, and still active. Still have a funeral home in Joelton with Kenny Anderson, and that's what I've done all my life. I actually was involved with the Bank of Goodlettsville for when we had the Bank of Goodlettsville with my brother and my daddy and my granddaddy for a long time, and then all 3 of them have passed away, and I'm the only one left, but still involved with the hometown funeral home, and And as far as politics is concerned, I got involved in 1983. I ran for the council seat and won that council seat, ran against a gentleman named Alf Rollins, who later on got reelected and sat next to me for the next 8 years, which we had a wonderful time together. And then, and then in '84, 6 months later, I had a group of gentlemen that had gotten together and wanted me to, or we, along with me just being there, most of the gentlemen were twice my age, I guess, and they wanted to find somebody to run for state rep.
They were looking for a sucker.
Yeah, they were running for somebody to run against Miss Jim McKinney at that time, who was the former Speaker of the House. And then a week or 2 after that, after they got there, I got called over to them in a room with several of them, and they said, "We've decided we want you to run." And that was only 6 months after I got elected to the council, which I didn't think was really what I wanted to do. So I asked my daddy and granddaddy about doing it. They didn't much think about the idea either. But I wound up doing it, and then wound up spending 20 years in the legislature, and till '99 in the council, 15 years doing both. '99 I was term limited, and in 2004 I was out of the legislature, and then stayed out for 8 years, and ran in 2007 for at-large, finished number 1, which was real unusual. I was really surprised and gratified that I was able to get enough votes not to have to have a runoff, and then ran again for my 2nd term, and here I am running for the vice mayor. And I guess you want me to tell you like why, when I ran in 2007, most people asked me to run because there wasn't anybody in the council that anybody knew, like there used to be.
Right. You
used to sit around a table, there'd be 10 or 12 people, and you could put out a sheet of paper, and you could say, write down the number of council members that you know, and some of them would know 7, 8, 9, or 10. And then if you did that in 2007, they might know 2. And so when they asked me to run again, they asked me because they didn't know anybody, and they at least wanted somebody in there who at least had some institutional knowledge of how, why, where, what, that type of thing. So I did, and then have been there for the last 8 years. That is a similar reason to why folks have asked me to run for the vice mayor's race, having come in under David Scobie, and then served a term with Jay West, and folks have asked me to come in. This is the first time in the history of Metro government that at least 27 people will be different. 24 incumbents are gone. 3 people have said they're not coming back, and if anybody gets beat, that number 27 will just go up. And the more council members that are new, the greater power the executive branch will get. It is as simple as that.
So a very basic question, what interested you in the position in particular? I know someone asked you to run. I mean, this is an important time. Why do you want to be vice mayor?
Well, I want to be vice mayor in order to bring the council up to a point where maybe we can have a little bit of a say-so, I guess, is in what mayors position might want to be on certain subjects. In the past, it has been very difficult to get members of the council, at least what I've seen over the last 7 or 8 years. It's difficult to get the council together because nobody knows anybody. And when I came through the council in the 80s and the 90s, there was about 15 or so council members that had been there. Some of them had been there since '63. Some of them, there was even a couple of charter members, Buster Boguski being one of them. There was about 15 council members that if you didn't get their ideas and you didn't get their approval of what you wanted to do as mayor, then it wasn't going to go anywhere. The last couple of mayors that have come through have pretty much been able to do what they wanted to because there's no cohesion in the council at all.
Since Metro voted to...
Since term limits. I mean, the good thing about term limits is it's what the people wanted.
Right.
The bad thing about term limits is what the people wanted.
Yeah.
But that's a part of it. I know we have something on the agenda that's to be voted on, but you know, term limits brings more power to the executive branch. When I ran and first 4 years I was there with David Scobie, I asked David Scobie how did he deal with his situation with Mayor Fulton, and being, since I had came in I actually got more votes than the mayor and the vice mayor in 2007. So I didn't want to put myself in a position where the mayor might be worried whether I was going to run against him, so I wouldn't be included in any of these talks of what his mission might be. So I asked, when David Scobie, I asked him about that, and he said the first 4 years he was in with Mayor Fulton, they did not have much talk, meaning the council didn't know anything that was going on, vice mayor didn't know anything that was going on. And so after the first 4 years, David went in to see Mayor Fulton and said, I want to let you know right now that I am not going to vote against you. David Scobie was the most popular person in the county at that time, without a doubt. But I am not going to run against you, and I want you to know that on the front end now, after the first term, and so that you can include me, or hope you do include me, in your ideas of what you want to do in the next 12, let's wait, that's the next 8 years, because he had 2 more terms. David said, best thing he ever did. So when Carl got elected, I did basically the same thing. 2 days after he got elected, I met him at Bricktops. We had lunch, and I made the pledge to him that you do not have to worry about me being an opponent for you on your second term, that I want to be somebody who's here that you do not have to worry about, so I can be a part of whatever ideas you may or may not have, so I can give you my feeling about it up front, and you won't have to worry about whether or not I'm going to be an opponent to you in 2011. And it worked. At least I thought that was the right thing to do. It worked for David. So
do you see? I mean, just out of curiosity, do you see the vice mayor as a cheerleader for the mayor, or as kind of a loyal opposition?
No, I see the vice mayor as a cheerleader for the council. What I've seen, the difference in the councils in being before term limits and after term limits is, before term limits, the council had some ability to have some say in what direction the mayor was going to go to. After term limits, we've lost that ability. Those individuals that just now get to the certain point where they can understand what's going on with the budget, understand what's going on with the department heads, just about that time, they're gone. That's just all there is to it, they're gone. We had one particular individual who was involved with one particular administration who, and it was while I wasn't there, who actually instructed the department heads. Now there's over 50 departments in Metro, and he instructed the department heads not to attend the council meetings and not to attend the committee meetings, that all questions from council members would be answered by this particular individual.
Could you reveal who that is?
I'll just say it was the finance director for the previous term.
Okay.
And as I came in, that's what. And what's happened is that particular attitude has been carried over. You got to remember, Carl now was the legal director for the previous administration, but that particular attitude has gone right about bad. It's been 16 years, so that particular attitude has drifted on over. There are some department heads that I can tell you that have not been in the council chambers on the number of fingers that I have on my hand in 7.5 years. And that's because they didn't have to under a previous administration. Previously to that, council members or the chairmen of committees were instructed by David or Jay West or Ronnie Stein or whoever was involved at that time, was if you didn't show up, your bill was deferred. No matter what the bill was, no matter how small it might be, a contract from the state,
right,
or whether it was something to do with buying fire engines that might cost $10 million. Mm-hmm. If the department head wasn't there, we deferred it automatically.
That's those kinds of procedural decisions are promulgated by the vice mayor.
Well, the vice mayor can insist that situation, his or her, if it just this particular case it's going to be his, can instruct the department, the chairmen of the committees, to they have got to be loyal to somebody. They've got to be loyal to the vice mayor to instruct the department heads to show up. Right. Now, I wouldn't do that without letting the mayor know.
Right.
I mean, I hope the next mayor, which shouldn't be a problem, you go into the mayor and you say, now, Mayor, this hadn't been going on in 16 years, and it went on in the previous 35. When we have a bill that comes before the council, we don't want the second and the third or the fourth person that's in charge of that particular department to be there. Mm-hmm. The department head needs to be there.
Right.
Just like it's always been, and you need to be, that person needs to defend or be there to ask questions or answer questions.
On the surface, that sounds very logical. Has that process impacted the governance of Nashville negatively in your mind?
In my mind, it's taken the council completely out of a lot of the decision makings, almost to the frustration point. Two frustrations I can think of that came up that the council kind of got frustrated on a lot of things. One of them was the bridge that was built from Sobro.
Right.
The council got frustrated because they weren't told of anything by any of the department heads. And then the most recent one was the three items that got completely defeated. Because not one single solitary council member, nor the vice mayor, nor anybody else knew one single solitary thing about moving the jail or the police department or the flood wall before you did. Let me put it that way.
I feel self-important now.
And I'm sorry I've got an hour, and I don't know how long the tape will last, but I'm thinking, when Jay West made me and I hear again, my wife told me, and when you get in these kind of things, you need to brag on yourself a little bit because you've been there for long enough, and so you need to tell about, what you've either done or not done or hadn't maybe get done. But when Jay West was elected vice mayor, he appointed me chairman of Budget and Finance. So I guess I've been chair of more committees than anybody else. And and when he did that, Mayor Bredesen had just gotten elected. Well, the first year he was there, Charlie Cook was the finance director, and Charlie Cook's wife got sick and he had to quit. So he became his finance director. He did not even hire a finance director. In fact, the mayor can only hire two people. He can hire a finance director and he can appoint a legal director, and that's all. So he became the finance director, and he had a computer just like this, and he did all the financials himself. Worked up everybody's budget himself. So the first year, he's presenting the budget on the normal day that we did at that time, which was in late May, I think, at that time. He did that. He called a press conference at 3 o'clock and called all the press in and presented the budget to the press. At 4 o'clock, the council was supposed to get the budget. When he sat down to give them that, and I'm in the budget and finance where I'm sitting in the chair that the vice mayor does on the budget and finance meeting, and all the other council members are there. It was a little cloudy in the room. The steam coming from everybody was just a little bit hard. You could see the steam coming because he had let the press know and called a press conference about the budget before he let the council know. And while that may sound a little petty, let me just put it that way. After the meeting, we had some discussions, and it never happened again. So I suspect if the mayor had done that, not long ago on all these other three items that got defeated, I suspect that wouldn't have happened.
Right.
There are all sorts of mayors, like when I first got here, that we can call on to: Briley, Purcell, Bredesen, et cetera. Is any vice mayor in the past, of the 7 vice mayors that have served, any of them had memorable terms, or any of them?
Oh, well, David Scobie's obviously the one that had the one is more than anything else. His name's on the wall, his plaque's on the wall. Charlie Tiger's basically the one that took the lead on that. But George Cate is still probably everybody looks at him to tell you why and how and what is Metro. He gives a synopsis of how Metro came about. And the only thing I actually asked Tim Walker to do in the Historical Commission was, he comes to Leadership Nashville. If you hadn't been to Leadership Nashville yet, I guess you need to make sure he gets Leadership Nashville over here. He gives a presentation, and I think Mr. Cate, I think he's in his 80s now, but he's sharp as tack. You wouldn't, but he gives a presentation as to how and where and what about Metro. I wanted it taped. For whatever reason, they hadn't taped it. He's taped it since then, and it gives, all of the blow by blow. As an undertaker, I can tell you where all the bodies are buried. George Cate can tell you where all the bodies are buried, and he gives it in his speech about that and how everything comes up. But it's on tape now, and it wouldn't be a bad thing for anybody who's interested in Metro government to see that, because it tells you why it failed in 59 and why it passed in 63.
Let's go back to the 3 most recent capital expenses that failed, capital requests that
Right.
failed. Are those things that you think will come back before the council?
Yes.
Do you think they'll pass?
I do not know. We'll have, as I said, we'll have 27 new members at least,
Right.
more than that. I think. Well, let me take that back. We did put in the budget to redo the prison or the sheriff's office,
Right.
and the budget for the police station. We did not put in the budget about the flood wall.
Right.
So the renovations can go forward. It will be up to the mayor's office, and whoever the mayor is deciding whether he wants to go forward with that,
Right.
or start all over again.
Right.
But that part got put in the resolution to spend the money to rehab that particular building.
Right.
It's up to the mayor as to whether he wants to do that or not. Different mayors can do different things. If you want to go ask, for instance, I better not say too much to say, but you could take this particular administration. A question you ought to ask the finance director of this particular administration is to ask him how many times, what all they had to delete from or stop from being done by the previous administration when Carl first got elected.
Was it a lot?
That's a good way to describe it. I'll just let it be your words. It's easier to go look and see.
Right.
Some things couldn't be stopped; they had gotten so far along, but there was quite a bit that was stopped.
So you mentioned George Cate, who, for the readers, he served from 1963 to 1966. David Scobie from 71 to 95. Any recent vice mayors of note? Because obviously with term limits, that certainly has changed the dynamic, as you mentioned.
Diane's done a good job. I've served with Diane, and she's done a good job, but she's followed what her previous vice mayors and her previous experience has been, and that may be different from mine, is what it amounts to. When we both got elected the first term, she got elected and I got elected without a runoff, and they had us on open line. And one of the questions they asked Diane, she would answer it one way, and I'd answer it just the opposite. Although she had the ability to say how she was going to handle the committees, and I was just telling her how the committees were handled prior to. She changes up committees assignments. That was never done prior to me being there. You never put a freshman as a chair. That never happened. Right. The first time I was appointed chair, I was in my 3rd year. but she was the vice mayor, and she could choose to do how she wanted to do. I'm assuming and I'm assuming because I shouldn't do that, but I do not know how Howard handled it, and I don't know whether he did that or not. But she moved people around from committee to committee. I don't think that's worked well. It didn't. All of the other that I know of, all the other vice mayors that I've been involved with, did not do that,
Right.
and there were some particular council members who had been. There was one particular council member who was a former police officer, and this past when I first got in 2007, did not get put on the safety committee, and so. It was that was a little odd, and so that particular person didn't know who to call, so they called me, and I just relayed that information. That's the one thing that person wanted to be on, was the safety committee.
So it is one of your goals, would one of your goals as vice mayor be to try to restore the council to its more legislative role as it relates to having legislative power in the government?
Yeah,
Metro.
the ideas, most of the time, and most all the time, ideas come from the bottom floor, and then they come to the second floor. Very little is generated in an idea kind of way from the second floor or the council.
Right.
The one item that I can remember was that got generated years ago was the adult education. And it used to be guarded with our lives. I mean, it was actually started back in the 60s and 70s. It's the only council initiative that's still there. Those council members, there's only somebody like me who came in so young and had the members who were actually there that started that the mayor we didn't have to worry about that budget because we were going to fund that budget because it was a council initiative. I'm probably the only council member left that remembers it. I wasn't there when we did it, but I certainly remember those that started it, and so that didn't have a problem getting its budget. Ideas don't really generate much from the council. I will say that one particular one was like the Greenways. Charlie Tigert went to Seattle along with the other council members. It was a council trip. Saw the Greenways, brought it in to Mayor Bredesen. Mayor Bredesen was obviously a visionary, and it went from there. That's one of those things where a trip, look what we saw. We've had a couple of things like that came off of this particular trip. I think the small cars, the cars that we
Right.
pulling around, Berkeley Allen's handling it, those kinds of things. We have found out that we do go. People do have other ideas in other cities that we don't necessarily have all the answers to. I'll tell you too that when I first came in, there were some council members who did not believe that council ought to spend money and go to other cities. That was kind of more of a junket, and they would say, you're spending taxpayers' dollars. So I didn't do it for 4 years, and the ones who abdicated that were all very good friends of mine. And so after that 4th year, here again, David Scobie pulled me in his office and said, "Timmy, you need to go on these trips." I said, first of all, you'll get to know your council members better, and secondly, you're going to learn something where these other places are that they do things, from everything from trash pickup to whether it's buses or mass transit or whatever it is, but you're going to learn something that these other cities do that we don't, and how to do it, and whether or not we can do it. He was right. So I started going to the trip. Since then, we've had a few council members that have come in and said, "I'm not going to go because we're spending council dollars or on trips and things like that." But there have been ideas that have been brought back, and as I always say, Greenways was one of the best, if not the best.
So there are several charter amendments up for election this year, 2 of which would reduce the size.
I'm not voting for them. I told Emily when she did that, I have voted 3 times to do away with term limits. The first time it got beat, the third time it got really beat, and the second time it got really beat, and the third time it got stomped. So this old boy's been stomped on 3 times. So I said, nope. I said, yeah, if you get it on the ballot, if you get 27 votes in the council's fine. Or in this case, you got a referendum to put it on. But this old boy is not voting for it. The folks, after 3 times, they have knocked me in the head and said 2 terms is what it's going to be.
So then the other amendment, Stein's amendment, would reduce the council without changing term limits. Is that a good idea?
To me personally, it's not. I don't think you try to fix something that's not broken. The first thing that comes to mind is it will certainly reduce the minority representation, no matter how you put it. The second thing that it will do is it will make individuals who run for council have to have more money. They're going to have to raise more money. When you have 35 districts, it costs, you can run a pretty good race for $15,000 to $25,000 if you get out and use your shoe leather and go door to door. But I always call my friend Carol Chumney, who's down in Memphis, and asked her. She served on Memphis's commissioners, and I think there's 11 down there. I think that's right. I asked Carol, I said, Carol, what did it cost you? She said $250,000 minimum. So I said, well, thank you. That's what I wanted to know. And they said the less number you get, the more it costs.
Right.
And while it may be easier for the mayor to work for, it won't be easier for the public. There's 2 things that the council does more than anything else: zoning and returning your telephone calls. And those are the 2 reasons that you get beat as well.
Right.
Zoning and not returning your telephone calls. You know, the budget is out there, and we do that every year. I mean, that's part of it more than anything else. But if you put less council members in and try to have them more territory to zone, there'll be some council members. And remember, it is a part-time job. They've still got to bring home food to put on the table, and let me tell you, the $15,000 or so that pay is not going to do that. But you widen that space, that area for zoning. Right. That's not good for the folks. Right now, folks feel like you can run into your council member in the store. You may go to church with him. You may have a child that goes to school with them. You'll see them at some play or something somewhere in the out of line areas, or you may go hunting and fishing with them or whatever. But you're just more available. I've just seen that through the years. It doesn't. If you lower it down, it makes you much less available.
But one of the things that is concerning to you, it sounds like, is that the council has lost its ability to counterbalance the mayor.
Absolutely.
And would a smaller council not help that by giving more power to?
No, I think the council having to have more power, so to speak, or have more influence on the mayor can start right why I'm sitting right here. It starts with the vice mayor. It's just as simple as that. It starts with the vice mayor. And the vice mayor's got to get along with the mayor, there's no doubt about that, but the mayor's got to understand that the vice mayor and the council should run as partners. And if the vice mayor is kept informed of what the mayor wants to do, if the mayor keeps the vice mayor involved, as he did with David Scobie during those last 8 years of Mayor Fulton's term, everything ran pretty smoothly. But when that wasn't included that way, you talked, and Jay West is the same way. He was included in with Mayor Bredesen. It was a different situation. What I have seen happen, and when I came in 2007, what I noticed is that council had adopted rules that basically hindered themselves. We have rules that we used to let the department heads sit in empty chairs, for instance, so that they were close to the council when we'd ask them questions when we were having committee meetings, for instance. We also put rules on ourselves about time limits. That only helped the executive branch of government. That has to come from the vice mayor to be able to do that. The whole years I was there, we never had time limits at all, not speaking from the floor or speaking in a committee at all. Now we have time limits. We never had time limits on the public when they were speaking at public hearing because the vice mayor, that's what I thought the job of the vice mayor was to do, was to control the meetings. And David Scobie and Jay West, the 2 I served under, did. by putting time limits on the council members themselves. I mean, and with no debate whatsoever on the floor, I think it's much, the council's much weaker. We have no debate on the floor.
Right.
That's what it amounts to, and that was kind of that's how it's been the last 7.5 years.
And you think that's more a function of the rules versus the people that are on the?
Oh, it's the rules. I mean, you only get 3 minutes and 4 minutes, and just depending on whether you're the sponsor or whether you're just speaking about the bill, and the public just gets 3 minutes, and that was new to me, and I understand. I looked back and asked John Cooper about it. It used to be like 8 minutes, and then the council lowered it to 5 minutes, and then they lowered it to 3 minutes, and there were
pretty soon it'll be 140 characters.
Oh yeah, and I understand when you go back, and if you go back and ask around, there were certain members of the council that were I guess to say they were a little bit uncontrollable, or had less, or the vice mayor maybe had less control over, or didn't control to the point, and that made the other council members basically say, in order to stop that, we're going to pass this rule. And there was a lot of when I got there, you could see that these rules and all that put on the council, it was more of an infighting in the council, so we didn't have any influence on what was going on with the mayor, because we were kind of mad at each other, or that's at least the way it had been for the last 16 years. And I'll say one other thing too. Over the last 16 years, the council has gotten a little partisan, and all I can tell you is having served in both at the same time. I served in the council for 15 years and in the state legislature at 15 years, so I went from both ends. But let me assure you, when I walked through the doors at the courthouse, whatever party I was connected with did not walk through the door with me. David Scobie made sure of that.
And you think that's changed?
Oh, it has changed completely. And I hope, I hope every person that you interview or that you come in here and say something to, will you ask them. I hope you ask them that. You can see the partisanship in there. You can see it in the votes. I mean, if you hadn't asked anybody, ask them. Maybe I'm being too truthful. But the partisanship is probably the worst thing that I see. When you come through the door, you're all Nashvillians. You're not, you're not any party of any kind, and that's probably been at the top of the list as the difference between what I've seen over the last 8 years and previous years.
How can you influence that as vice mayor?
You don't let it happen. You just don't let it happen. Now, you probably don't say it on TV, and you probably don't talk to the person that you want to be talking to over TV, but you just don't let that happen. And as the vice mayor, you do have certain abilities that if that person wants to talk, if that person wants to be on a certain committee, if that person wants to be a chair of a committee, there's a cue board over here that you can, who gets to talk next. You do not have to go in line. So there's certain strategies that you came in. When I got elected in 1984, I came in with Ned McWhorter. Ned McWhorter sent out 55,000 letters for my opponent. So when he came in, he said, "Well, what can I do to help you?" I said, "All I want is to be on the same committees that my opponent was on." And I'm telling you right now, at that time, Mayor Fulton was running for governor, and I'm endorsing you for governor. So I endorsed him for governor, and Mayor Fulton was running, who I was with at that time but I got put on Finance, Ways and Means, and state and local, and I was the only freshman, and have been the only freshman in the state legislature to ever be put on Finance, Ways and Means. There are ways to handle certain things, and and he knew how to do that. That wasn't me doing that. That was him. He knew how to do what to do. I knew what I was going to do to help him decide what he wanted to do with me, but then he knew what to do to reward me, I guess.
Talking about endorsements, have you endorsed any candidate for mayor?
No.
Do you plan to?
No. I know them all. I think the last time a mayor endorsed a couple of council members. Those particular council members got beat, and that didn't happen. You know what I'm talking about? Do you remember?
No, I don't.
Well, I won't say, but anyway, that doesn't happen often. And when that happened, we were surprised, and I wasn't in the council at that time.
Well,
And
let me ask it another way. Since we broached this before, for any of those 7 candidates running for mayor, is there anyone that you would have concerns about working with? If you
Oh,
were to be
no,
vice mayor?
no. I mean, I know them all, and I mean, there are obviously some look like they're ahead of the others. Some, look like they're. I saw where Jeremy, for instance, is wanting to have another debate over at TSU. I mean, I think most of the debates, or at least ones that are going to be on TV, are gone. We're not far from early voting, when it boils right down to it. I mean, once you get much past the second week in July, I mean, and then what do you do come the day of election in Davidson County now? You have less people going to the polls on the day of election than you do. More than 50% of the people have already voted.
Yeah.
But that's totally different than how I grew up. Now all of us grew up voting. I always like to tell the story too, and y'all excuse me, I'll tell one partisan story. When I was in the legislature, when early voting came up, it came to the House floor, every single solitary Republican voted against early voting. Whenever I'm speaking to a group, they all look, and because I mean it's. It's usually a group of people that are split between Republicans or Democrat, but all the Republicans say, every one of them voted against early voting.
They like to socialize at the polls.
Yeah. For whatever reason, I think they thought more people were going to go to the polls at that time, and they just didn't want early voting. Now, I think if you do the numbers, you'll find that the areas that are predominantly Republican vote more early voters than those individuals that are not predominantly Republican. It's funny how things work out.
So partisanship is something you would like to see diminished within the council. It does seem to me, and I think the Nashville Next process maybe illustrates this a little bit, that there are many different divides within Nashville. We certainly saw maybe the rural part of Nashville is concerned that it will lose its character. Mm-hmm. We've got Southeast Nashville that is concerned about relative investment. You've got Bellevue having some of the same concerns. How does the vice mayor help deal with having one Nashville or dealing with those divides? And what impact will a council that is so new have in that kind of partisanship? It's a different.
Well, hopefully you get rid of it, because you really, whether you're just say it right loud, whether you're a Democrat or Republican or an independent, liberal, or conservative or whatever, when you get down to zoning, you don't care. It's about who's living, what's happening right here next door to you. You don't care what his beliefs are. It's about.
And I was doing partisanship in quotes. I wasn't.
I know it's
local.
That's where zoning. That's where partisanship goes way out the window.
Right.
And but those local council members, zoning is going to hit them in the face. When I was coming through during the 80s and 90s, it was zoning all in the outside part of the counties. Now it's in we had some council members that were there when I was there for the first 16 years who never had a council bill, but they were the ones that lived downtown. Never had a zoning bill, because there was no infill zoning during that period of time. Now it's gotten both ways to some extent. In the rural sections of the city, the only thing that Nashville Next has done that I've seen in the meetings that I've been to is it may have given the impression that when Nashville Next puts a typical overlay. They had the old term of the overlays over certain pieces of property. The public or the people that live around that area or in that area think that they are being rezoned, where that only this can be done because Nashville Next says it's done. The one thing that's in the charter that the Metro Council does is that the mayor does not do is zoning. And what I saw going to the meetings with Nashville Next is that the staff tended to give the individuals who were involved with the Nashville Next, tended to give the individuals that were involved in certain areas the indication that whatever went on their property, as far as Nashville Next was concerned, that's how it was going to develop. Well, the underlying zoning is how it's going to be developed unless the council member decides to do differently. Right. And that's what's bothered me. I sat back at a couple of meetings like that and watched, and they gave the indication that that's just because we put this type of display over this on a wall or whatever that's how it's going to develop. Well, it doesn't do that. The underlying zoning is there, and that has to be changed. And it also gets down to property rights. A person that's got the property already zoned, and I was here, you were here. Remember Comzo?
No, I actually only moved here in 07.
Oh, well, let's take that back. It was before that. We actually rezoned every piece of property in Nashville back in the late 90s, and they called it Comzo. You can look it up. You know how we let everybody know? They put it in y'all's newspaper, and you can imagine how small the print was. So, but council members had an opportunity to go back to the mapping people and say, don't rezone any of my property like, and I forgot what they called it. It was called Comzo, but it was like Nashville Next. They had the staff went around and said, we're going to make this, commercial. We're going to make this, light commercial or whatever. But said they went into districts. I was one of them, and said, don't rezone anything in my district. Period. Which Comzo did. Nashville Next doesn't, but Comzo did. So there are some people that have come to the council since then, when that came in since then, and came in 10 years later and said, I want to do this to my property, and they go and look and say, well, it's rezoned. Said, no, it wasn't. It was this. No, it got rezoned in 98, 96, or whenever we did Comzo. And they didn't know it because they didn't get anything in the mail. Right. All it happened was in the newspaper. So the only thing about Nashville Next that I've seen that's could be a little problem down the road is that, and you can see it now. We've got a couple of places around there. Is the folks in those areas have been misled by, I hate to say, the Planning Commission to some extent, that Nashville Next is going to rezone their property to keep it like they want to do, and not how it's zoned, the underlying zoning is. And most of that has to do with the rural areas. They want to keep it rural. The property may already be zoned R15, which can put a single family or a duplex every 15,000 square feet. And that's the only thing I see is that they've been misled, and then I hate to see the district council members are going to have to deal with that. Yeah. You've seen a lot of it, I guess, in the
the Waste Creek issue.
Yeah, well, and I represented that area for 20 years, and that's one of those areas that they all want to keep it rural, and so do I. Except that you can't do it by taking somebody's property rights away from them. And then when I say that, the sewer lines are laying there, and the water lines are laying there, and they've been there and cost millions of dollars. Right. And
in
that's
anticipation
of development, yeah. Right? And those folks have been misled into believing that Nashville Next is going to keep those properties from being developed as they are zoned.
Right.
The district council member will decide that.
Do you think this will be one of the major issues the council deals with over the next?
In some areas it will be, but just remember that the council, and they've got a policy on the Planning Commission that if it's against their policy, council can override that with 27 votes. That's never really hard to do.
Right.
I mean, it always reminds me of, there's been only one bill that's ever been vetoed, zoning bill that's been vetoed, and Mayor Fulton did it years and years ago. When it takes 30 votes to override veto. I wasn't there when this happened. Okay, this was the term before it and it got 38 votes, whatever. So no mayor since then has vetoed any zoning bill and has not gotten involved. So, I mean, if anything, and as a vice mayor, I would think that the vice mayor would guard that right of the council. That is the one part of the charter that we still have complete and total control over is zoning.
And would you see yourself as a very vocal advocate for certain initiatives, whether it's zoning?
I'll probably be more vocal if that's just what you mean. Mm-hmm. I'll probably be more vocal. The vice mayors that I served under weren't necessarily vocal from the chair, but they were to some extent, but they came to more meetings, let me put it that way. They came to the finance meetings, they came to the budget hearings, and they were a little more vocal there. David Scobie's old saying is that when your council member would get up, and they do it now, and they'll say they'll move a bill, and they say with a I'd like to move the bill, and with a small comment, and the vice mayor would say, "You're way ahead at this time," which meant that you don't have to be saying anything. There would be, like you get up and, there'd be no on a public hearing night, mm-hmm. and somebody would get up, there'd be 50 people for it and nobody against it, and the council member wants to speak. Well, yeah. David knew politely how to tell that council member when to say, "You're way ahead at this time." Yeah. And so that's how the meeting moved along. Maybe that's why we didn't have to have time limits.
Interesting, one of the issues that was brought up in the recent article by Joey Garrison was attendance.
He did a good job, by the way.
Very good, very good. How do you, as vice mayor, control that, or how do you incent council members to show up? Because as we know, many of them, in some cases, have not shown up to the meetings.
Well, let me just say, you either just sit down and talk with them, which is what you should do. Mm-hmm. My phone number's been the same as it is for 40 years. As a funeral director, you better be able to get a hold of me. I mean, I've left my phone in the car. It's probably the only time I will. I've been available. So you talk to those council members to start with. Unfortunately, term limits has put a situation on where when those council members get in that are term limited, it happened in 98 and 99, the first time it happened. I saw council members who I had literally grown up with, who had been there 20 years, not come to meetings that they never would before. Especially when we had budget hearings, any kind of special hearing or something, they were always there. That didn't happen when as they got closer to their term. The council members, I will say to other council members now that if you're term limited out right now, bottom line is you don't even have to answer your phone. You can do what you want to when you want to. That's terrible to say. Right. But you can't. Nature. Human nature. I had somebody call me last night about a water issue, and I told her, I said I'm in the middle of a campaign. If I'm still in, we'll certainly look at it. Your council member just happens to be somebody who doesn't have any opposition. They'll be able to look into it. But you get to a certain point where now those council members that are coming back still keep coming. But the ones that are term limited, it's terrible, but that's just part of what, as you say, it's just human nature. They just sometimes don't answer the phone. That's not a real good thing. But that's what the voters wanted. That's what term limits tends to bring. And the other thing that term limits seems to bring is that, and you've seen it even in me and others, is that the first term they're there, they're learning everything they can, and they've got the fire in the belly, and they want to keep going. The second term they're there, they're thinking about what can they run for, what they set themselves up to run for, and that's kind of what you see more than anything else. Especially, I saw it, and I'd been out for 8 years. Okay, I'd served, and I'd been out and came in, but when I came back in, there were 29 people on the ballot for at large. So that's the most I think there'd ever been. And then 4 years later, there were 25. So and it was people who were term limited out was going in. And you can look at your list. I guess I've got the list. Look how many council members who are district council members who are running at large. And let me assure you, if there's nothing like running your district is like this corner of this table over here, and you've had, that's what you've run in, and then now you're fixing to run countywide. And look at what else you've got to go to, or got to try to get to, and how do you do it?
Right. Well, we're at the end of our time. Are there any final questions or any final thoughts that you'd like to share with us and the readers?
You never leave a situation where you don't want to ask somebody for your vote. I hope you'll vote for me. I hope you'll vote for me, and I hope you'll vote for me. And if I get elected vice mayor, I'm as close as the telephone. You can call me anytime you'd like to.
Thank you very much, Mr. Garrett.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. And thank you to the readers of Tennessean.com and our editorial board members.